It's time for Dr. Rademaker's Prescription for Transformation. Let's tap into your own authentic genius and live the life you desire.
Are now listening to
Join Dr. Rademaker for an enlightened conversation about our brain intelligence, our body intelligence, and our energy intelligence. And now, here's your host, Dr. Bart Rademaker.
I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, and this is Prescription for Your Transformation. Real people, real conversations, and real success. And what's delightful about what I get to do on this program is really get an insight of some of the geniuses of people that I know. And one of the cool things that, some of us might want to know is have a glimpse to our future. And I can't think of anybody better than Larry Martin. He's an astrocartographer who has a sixth sense as to what's going to happen next. And so for today's show, very excited to be talking about the future, our future of all of us in 2021. So listen carefully to what Larry has to share with you so that you can plan accordingly.
When I look back at my economic forecast from a year ago, it's right on the money. I just didn't have the exact same reasoning. For example, here in the United States, we have an unbelievable amount of debt. And the more money they keep printing with nothing to back it up makes that debt even worse. And ultimately, and I still think it's going to be right about the first half of 2022, we're going to see an end to that debt, either by default or by switching over to the gold standard. So there's a lot of economic people that consult with me on a near daily basis, wondering about gold and silver prices and all kinds of other things. But as far as the reasoning, I was simply going on astronomical cycles and forecasts. I wasn't actually looking and seeing, oh, we're going to have this massive pandemic, the entire world's going to shut down, and that's the reason for the correction in the springtime of 2020.
Right.
So, unless you're really into doom and gloom and the end of mankind, you're not looking for aspects to be quite as harsh as they ended up being. The good news is that we're way through the far worst of it. The worst was absolutely between April and June. And I had so many phone calls in June asking me, is the year over yet? Is the year over yet?
Right.
But now that we are into the last, beginning the fourth quarter of 2020, I can safely tell you we just have one more hurdle to get over, and that's election day. And I was looking at this a year ago, almost 2 years ago, thinking, well, election day in the United States is going to be on November 3rd. And perhaps not the worst planetary alignment, because that was back in April, but the second worst planetary alignment is literally on November 3rd. So I'm gonna see if I can't grab like a valid early ballot, vote sometime in October, and then I don't know, hide in the basement, find a bunker somewhere, because we're so addicted now to our technology, whether it's your smartphone or your calendar or your website or your contact list. I mean, I talk to my kids all the time and best friends all the time. I don't think I could tell you any one of their phone numbers. I just know to, BART, and that's your phone number, and to lose that data or to think that I don't have that backed up is a frightening thought. Even just the idea of getting a new phone or a new tablet is anxiety producing, because you have to transfer your data somewhere. And if that doesn't go well, if you've ever been in that boat, it can be a frightening experience. And so what happens is when the planets are in a stressful aspect, and let's say 50 years ago, we would have said, well, just don't mail any letters that day, and don't plan on making any phone calls, and maybe just grab a beer, sit out in the backyard, have a barbecue. That sounds like great advice. We don't understand how many different ways we're connected, like to our cable television or the internet or our devices. to where if somebody says there's going to be a communication snafu, you don't really comprehend how frustrating or difficult those days are going to be until they happen.
Right.
Because we're just no longer in an era where, we're upset because the mail's late from the post office. That's not even an issue anymore for most people. But if you can think about your phone not working for a day, that's just a nightmare waiting to happen. And so a lot of the things we're more vulnerable to are much more prevalent today than they've ever been before. Even simple things that you would have had your computer geek do for you years ago, now you've got to do it on your own, because if you were to call somebody up and say, hey, I need somebody to help me back up my computer, like Dr. Phil would say, well, good luck with that. Right. There's so many things now you've got to fix on your own, or you've got to be somewhat tech savvy, or you're going to do without that connection. I don't even know if I'd call that a privilege anymore. It's just a way of life now. So when we got to 2020, a majority of outer planets were moving into Capricorn. And we foresaw this, 20, 30 years ago, and just thought, wow, maybe aliens would invade the Earth. We just looked at it and thought, well, Capricorn is associated with business, government, groundedness, reality, work hard, get good rewards. I mean, it's all the things your parents wished you would be when you were growing up. In other words, they wanted you to be mature and responsible and be a good person and get good grades and all the things you always knew that you were supposed to do, but you either failed a little bit or you tried and did really well and then wondered where, the
Right.
free porta was, In other words, why am I not a millionaire by age 20 if I did everything right? So when these three outer planets moved into Capricorn, and they started about 2016, but all of them didn't gather together until very late in 2019 and the first quarter of this year, 2020. And it really rocked our world. It really, does anybody have a plan? Does anybody know what they're doing? And the correct answer is no. Nobody knows what they're doing. Our entire way of defining reality was being turned upside down. And you probably could list several examples yourself of some people handled it as well as you could imagine. Other people coped. They adjusted. They went through maybe a really tough month or three and came out fairly okay. And then we've got a handful of people that have not done so well,
Right.
or even people that might have even passed away. So to say it was difficult is just a gross understatement. To say that we're through it all is to say, well, we're mostly through it all. And if people are expecting election day to be the solution of their problems, they're going to have a very tough time getting through the end of the year. But if you're like me and we've seen the worst of this already, and now we're kind of looking at maybe, like a final pop quiz of, okay, how do you define reality? What do you invest your time, effort, and energy in? And what advice would you give yourself if you were starting this year all over? And I think if you can answer any of those questions, you're going to have a good end of the year and even a more fabulous 2021. And that's what I've been telling a lot of my clients, just please do what you can to get through the holidays. Every country is different. I see people in Australia getting arrested for walking outside without a mask. I see other countries like Sweden being wide open as if nothing's ever gone wrong. So it's very difficult to give one blanket statement to everybody because they live in different cultures, different societies, different rules. Heck, even in the United States, some of the 50 states are like Sweden. Indiana's wide open. All businesses are open. No masks required anywhere. Florida is trying to get to that point. All the other states are somewhere in between. And of course, if you're in California, you're still in complete lockdown, where not even schools are open. And like I said, most of the states in the United States are somewhere in between there. So I think we've all had to do a lot of introspection. Everyone's gone through a certain degree of isolation. Even if you're married with kids, you've been isolated in some way, shape, or form. And I still want to believe, and we won't be able to prove this for another year or two, I still want to believe that we've entered what I call a great awakening. We might have talked about this last time, where in my optimism, or some people call it fantasy, we've learned that what's on the inside of us is what's important. Our health, our mental constructs, our mental strength, as opposed to being physically strong. That it really didn't matter what industry you were in this year. It didn't matter how old you were. It really didn't. It didn't matter how much money you made. Obviously, ridiculously wealthy people might have had it a little easier than some, but they were worried about their investments. They watched the stock market nearly crash. So I don't think there was anybody unaffected. All of us were affected to some degree. And I think it caused a lot of people to really review their life or take another look at their life direction, if that makes any sense. And I don't think I'm being overly dramatic. I think to some, they went through absolute hell. And to others, they went through a lot of insight. Hopefully, we all gained a little bit of both. Because going through hell, I think, lets us understand how strong we really are. And I think anytime we go through tough times, it's a confidence builder, and also gives you firsthand experience when you give advice to other people. No one likes a hypocrite, and no one likes somebody, giving advice on something they haven't really participated in. But to someone like yourself, Bart, or what I do for a living, and I can say, hey, I've got firsthand examples of this is what happened, or that's how it went down, or this is what they did to solve the problem. And I can't even express in words how valuable that has been. You can't go find a college course on 2020, and so I look at that as being just an infinitely valuable lesson. And it's going to make the next 3 years just look like a walk in the park. Even when we hit the economic skids, which are coming like a freight train, and you can see all the gates are down, the red lights are flashing, and we're just standing around wondering, well, let's print another $1 trillion. And everyone's like, yay, all right, yay. Hey, write me a check for $1,200. Just go ahead. In fact, I just paid my German Shepherd. People over the age, only people over the age of 50 know that there's a day of reckoning coming for all that.
Right.
Younger people are just wondering, if somebody can just give them a new credit card. So when we hit that day of reckoning, we're going to look back on 2020 and go, well, the whole world's broke, but at least I don't have to wear a mask. In other words, I think we'll keep it in perspective, and I think we'll do just fine. The key is not just handling it astrologically, but to handle it in a more sane position. If we can switch over to the gold standard, which my friends who are experts all say, that's our only choice. In other words, we don't have 5 or 6 different choices. We can't keep kicking the can down the street like we said back in 2010, which is exactly what we did. We kicked the can down the street and kept printing more money. We don't have that option. We really don't. Countries across the world will no longer accept the dollar. Oil is not the commodity it used to be. In other words, our own oil production has flooded the market. So instead of $120 a barrel for oil, it's what I think, maybe 40, maybe.
Oh, is it that low? So, I didn't know that.
It's low. It got down to about $34 just a week ago. So, thinking that that's going to pay for your kids' college, not going to happen. And gold and silver have not reached the heights that we all predicted. So, and that's due to a lot of short selling by JP Morgan and a lot of the banks that are right on the edge of complete meltdown and bankruptcy. And the printing of trillions of dollars is the only thing keeping our banks afloat right now. So I give it a good another year. But I think, where we're all going is that looking at it astrologically gives me a sense of peace and calm. In other words, I tell everybody all the time, I can't move a planet. I can't make your chart look better than it does. And the good news is it probably won't be any worse than what I'm looking at. But instead, I'm looking at it as a series of potentials to be able to say, okay, well, if you're an Aquarius, you're going to have the best year out of the last 21. That doesn't mean you're winning the lottery. It just says you're having the best year of the last 21. And what you do with that is entirely up to you.
Right.
We'll talk about your chart in a few minutes here. But if we were talking about highlights or lowlights of 2020, we'd be here for another hour entirely. The last presentation I did lasted about 3 hours. But 2021 has actually very few major points. The difference is, instead of those aspects lasting about a month and impacting us for several, we're only going to have about 2 phenomena, but they're going to last all year. So whatever happens in your birth chart for January, February, March will pretty much dominate the entire year. So the bad news is, if it's something really tough and you're going through a challenge, it's going to last all year. The good news is you'll have plenty of time to adjust. In other words, it won't feel like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders in one single event. It'll feel like, wow, okay, this is tough. This is difficult. Okay, now I'm going to need April and May to kind of cope and figure out where I'm at now. And then I might use June, July, August to make an adjustment or make a change. And then I'll kind of see how it all shakes out the rest of the year.
Right.
But if you're having something fantastic happen, let's see. I think you and I both have some pretty good stuff happening. Yeah, we do.
Good.
Then you really want to, I love it like a form of three-dimensional chess. I like to really strategize. And maybe I see something for myself in May or June. I'm going to mark it on my calendar in January, and I'm going to, make even just post-it notes if I have to say, okay, well, I want to try this in January, prepare in February, really review what I'm going to do in March, April, start to, execute, get things going, May, and then June, boom.
Right.
In other words, I want to have my eyes open, my ears open. It's so funny. We always worry and have so much anxiety, always thinking, oh, this could happen, like Murphy's Law. And I remember just a very wise teacher in college told me, he says, well, you know what, Lair? He said, it can always turn out better than you think, too. And that just always impacted me, because you don't hear too many people talk like that. Well, geez, Bart, you just had this fantastic event happen. Maybe next month it could get even better.
Right.
And almost none of us look up and go, okay.
Right.
We're waiting for the proverbial second shoe to drop. But we start the year in 2021 almost like in a whole new point of view. Jupiter and Saturn come together once every 21 years, and they're going to do it this time in the sign of Aquarius. So wherever Aquarius is in your birth chart, and we're all born during different sun signs during the year, but the hour that you're born also has great impact. For example, if you're the zodiac sign of Cancer and you're born at sunrise, that means not only are you a Cancer, but you have Cancer rising. If you're born at sunset, you have Cancer rising and the opposite sign, Capricorn setting, or I'm sorry, Capricorn rising. So, you can have a blending of different signs impact you. And somewhere on everybody's chart, Aquarius is somewhere. In your chart, it's all in finances. So you're going to not just have a month of changes in your finances, you're going to have an entire year where your finances are going to change. And, we can always say change is inevitable, but for me, I always like specifics. I like details, okay, well, what is going to happen to me in January, February, March, April, May? And whenever, and again, only once every 21 years, Jupiter and Saturn are together, a really amazing phenomena takes place. Because Jupiter expands life, gives us opportunities. It tells us, all the things that are good that are going to happen to us. It's kind of like Santa Claus coming to town. Saturn is exactly the opposite. It contracts. It actually brings the market down, so to speak, or it brings you down to earth. Jupiter is the party with your friends at a nightclub. Right. Saturn is the old man in the back of the club going, last call.
Right.
2 a.m. You all have to be out of there. In other words, Saturn tells you got a bill to pay. You got an exam to take for school. You better be home by a certain hour or mom and dad are going to be angry. You might have had fun at Christmas, says Jupiter, but Saturn gives you the bill in January. And Saturn, in its symbolism, as much as we might complain that it contracts and it takes things away from us, it also gives us clarity. It allows us to build with maturity and responsibility. In other words, if we had the proverbial infinite credit card, which Jupiter would love, Jupiter is Zeus in the Greek mythology, or king of the gods. And if you can imagine what kind of credit card Zeus would have, you know, no limit,
No,
buy anything you want, you know. And in Greek mythology, Zeus used to get in a lot of trouble. I always remind people, I said, well, Zeus is king of the gods. He had over 10,000 girlfriends, which really ticked off his wife. So he would always get into trouble by overdoing things or going too far or not recognizing that other people have limits or disadvantages from time to time. In other words, there's a lack of compassion.
right.
Jupiter's expansion. Saturn brings us back down to Earth. Saturn reminds us that we're here to build and hopefully sustain long-term pleasures rather than just pursue short-term pleasures. So when they get together, it's kind of a 1-2 effect. It's like you get your wish and you're able to take amazing advantage of growth and opportunities.
Right.
But Saturn comes right in, makes sure you didn't overdo it. And if you did, there's going to be a reckoning. But then Saturn makes permanent and more stable that which you're able to deal with.
Right.
And that's a wonderful thing, because in all of our charts, Saturn runs in almost 30-year cycles. That's how long it takes to go around the sun one time. So when we're talking about permanence, it's going to depend on your age, of course. Someone like yourself or myself, where 30 years from now, I think we'll have very different priorities. Oh, yeah, well, eating's nice. Walking to the bathroom without tripping and falling, that'd be great.
Right.
In other words, the goals we have today are pretty much going to be, I think our last major effort at making major life changes. Not too many people are trying to start a business when they turn 85. Not saying you can't, I'm just saying it's unlikely.
Right.
So this is kind of, I think in my mind, anyone in their 50s or 60s, this is kind of our last hurrah. This is our last chance to put our lives in a direction that we are really happy with. Again, doesn't mean you can't make changes along the way, but when Saturn adds that permanence, making changes becomes more difficult. Again, it can be done, but it's not done easily. And for people that have that midlife crisis, where they suddenly feel lost or without direction, 2020 was a year to change all that. I don't know of anybody that I've talked with this year who was completely lost and without direction. Almost kind of like, well, if you take everything away from a person and they're left with literally their breath, a roof over their head, some food, life gets easier real fast. And even people with very complicated lives, I think, found a simplification this year. And even if they were isolated to one degree or another, I think being left with your own thoughts forces you to face certain realities. And had we been busy with our smartphones and our calendars and taking a jet plane here and there, I had a schedule this year where I would be in 7 different cities. That changed to 1 really fast. And all of a sudden, all my trips that were planned were canceled outright, or I canceled them. It wasn't practical to leave the country. So going to Canada or going to Europe, it's not going to happen. And it didn't matter how much money you had or who was going to pay me what. Even in business, it was just not going to happen. So I learned how to Zoom. I learned how to get a better camera for the computer. We all learned how to telemedicine and how to telecommunicate or work from home. We've learned that if we're going to be dependent on our technology, we better make it work for us. And that's how 2021 is going to begin. We're going to see some, what I call it, a snapping of the rubber band.
Right.
In other words, you see domination by companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook and Twitter. We're going to see that rubber band stretch and break. We're going to see, this is an old phrase you probably haven't heard in a while, Antitrust laws are going to be enforced. And I don't think that's happened since I was very young and I watched them break up AT&T.
Right.
I mean, there's probably others that have been out there, but AT&T, I think, was the most famous one in my lifetime. I think you'd have to go back to Standard Oil if we're talking about my parents' lifetime and how Standard Oil was broken up into oil companies. And then we saw AT&T broken up into different phone companies. Now we're going to see Google broken up into probably 20 or 30 companies. We're going to see Facebook broke up. We're going to see Twitter broken up. We're going to see Amazon broken up, as much as Jeff Bezos doesn't want to hear that. And he'll be just fine. For all you worried about him and his finances, he still might be the very first trillionaire. So I think Jeff will be just dandy. But we're going to see a backlash of people saying we don't want to be pawns of these giant tech corporations. In other words, we want a little more control back. If 2020 didn't teach us anything, it was about, hey, if I've got to be responsible for myself, I'd at least like to have the freedom to get there. In other words, being forced to do something. I think people are going to fight back a little bit. We are already seeing protests and riots in Germany and England, and well, we've seen some riots here. All the peaceful people throwing the Molotov cocktails. We're going to see that unrest continue for a little while longer, probably well into January. But after that, I think people are finally going to just say, hey, enough of this. We're done acting like small children throwing tantrums. We really want to expand our lives and see some responsibility take place, or accountability. Some people that think we have to get rid of all the corruption in the government. We're probably going to see a lot of people going to jail, and I mean a lot of people. Even to the extent where you may not even see it in the headlines. It'll be like, oh, did you hear so-and-so went to jail? Oh, yeah, all right. We're going to look at it like, oh, it's just another day. But it's going to be a real cleansing. And that's where I see this great awakening adding a lot of spirituality to things that we thought would never happen. In other words, almost not so much a left versus right, but more like a good versus evil. That the human trafficking, the child trafficking, child abuse, women being abused, domestic violence. I think we're not going to see an end to any of that, of course, but I think there's going to be some very strong steps taken. Where Jupiter is saying, okay, you've had your fun, and even some evil people have gotten away with something, but Saturn's going to come in right after that. They're only going to be a few degrees apart. And Saturn's going to come in and say, no, all your money laundering, it's over. The banks that keep on adding more and more debt, gone. The bank will just disappear. We may even see an end to banking as we know it by the end of 2021. There's a lot of people talking about digital currency, cryptocurrency, blockchain passwords, where every single keystroke you hit on the computer will have its own blockchain password. So eventually we'll have money exchanged that way. We won't need banks.
Right.
We just won't need them. You'll do your transactions through the U.S. Treasury, for example, or the German government, the German Treasury, for example. We just won't need these banks and charging us usury, as some people call it, or interest. There won't be a point to it. And a lot of people can't fathom that unless you're really into science fiction and you watch a lot of Star Trek. You'll remember, oh yeah, they don't really have money in that show, do they? And I do think we're headed that direction. Gene Roddenberry used to be really into astrology, and he said, I see the day where money will be obsolete. There just won't be a point to it. And I think the age of Aquarius absolutely represents that. I don't think that's going to happen completely in our lifetime, but I think we're going to see, we've already seen credit cards take over cash or coins.
Right.
So I think it's just the next evolutionary step. It'll be your password you remember, or your password manager that holds all your blockchain codes, or your fingerprint. I think, I've got one of those Samsung phones. You start it by using your fingerprint, So, I think there's a lot of technology that's going to evolve even farther than what we've ever dreamt of. And I think we're going to see a lot of revelations with new inventions, new medicines, not necessarily the end of the common cold, but we're already seeing cancer cures. You know, I go to Twitter jail at least once a week because I type the word hydroxychloroquine. And you know, what was used for malaria 60 years ago now is being found to cure or have an impact on Lyme disease, on arthritis, on lupus. And of course, people are saying great things in Europe about it taking care of COVID-19. But I think that's just scratching the surface. It's almost like the pandemic has forced a lot of pharmaceutical companies to really get their books out and really get serious about coming up with vaccines and medicines and all kinds of things. And every medical doctor I know is completely fed up with the current system. You know, waiting 10 months to get paid by insurance companies, or being told what they can and cannot prescribe, being threatened by medical boards or insurance premiums or malpractice insurance. I mean, I just don't know anybody graduating from med school jumping up and down yelling hooray, and thinking that they're going to be super wealthy by getting into medicine. I think those days are gone too.
Right.
You know, so it's not the ultimate job, let's say. It's kind of like when your parents see you growing up and they want you to be a doctor someday, or a lawyer, you know, or a rocket scientist, you know, and you know, all of those jobs have their share of jokes, but I think they've transformed for the worst in a lot of ways. I mean, great people. A lot of my best friends are medical doctors, and I got 2 visiting this weekend. But wow, are they fed up with the state of Nevada, or they're fed up with the state of California? I mean, I don't think I've heard anybody from any industry complain as much as medicine right now. But I think by the end of 2021, I think that they'll be happy again, and I think we'll see a big kind of a snap back of people wanting their rights back and people demanding of government, or at least reminding that government authority comes from the people and not from a dictator's ego. Let's say that.
Right.
What we're also going to see, and this begins in late February, early March, and peaks about June, is a series of conflicts. Like I said earlier, had we not had 2020, we'd be really freaking out and thinking 2021 is going to be a bad year. But I just see it as just being a continuation of change that's forced upon us. In other words, Uranus, and we pronounce it that way to cut down on the jokes. Uranus is in a very difficult position because it represents chaos, disorder, and disruption. And it's right now, it's in the zodiac sign of Taurus, which is very grounded, earthly, stable, materialistic, very, very adverse to any change whatsoever. I mean, if you want someone who you'd say is steady as a rock, you'd want to go find a Taurus. You know, somebody you can count on doing the same thing every day for 50 years, like clockwork, you want a Taurus. But when the Uranian arc visits, which is once every 84 years, that solid groundedness turns upside down. And suddenly, we don't remember which way is up. And suddenly, you know, gravity isn't what it used to be. Getting on a jet plane and thinking you're just going from A to B, not as easy as it used to be. The things you took, everything you took for granted in 2019, you're not taking it for granted anymore. So the Great Awakening, as I call it, could also be, I think, a fresh appreciation for what we do have, and a lot less complaining about what we don't have. I don't know anyone that had problems in 2019 that then came to me this year saying they have the exact same problem. They've taken the problems of 2019 and they've thought, God, what was I worried about? That's nothing compared to the crap I'm going through this year. So everyone's got this new perspective. And in 2021, I think we're going to finally look at things and say, you know what? That's my new reality. This is the new way of doing things, because 2020 is too chaotic. There's no way any of us can say, okay, Bart, this is my new routine in life, or I'm going to get up at this hour every morning, or I'm going to make sure I do this. You know, 2020 is still too much in flux, and will continue through the end of November. 2021 will be the unique opportunity for us to finally say, okay, I can't do anything the way I did it in 2019. And what I learned in 2020 was this about myself or that about myself. And in 2021, now I can make that my new routine.
Right.
The things we settle on in 2021 will have a longer shelf life. In other words, instead of it lasting 15 minutes like this year, it's going to last like 7 or 8 years, which means economic decisions, political decisions, government decisions are going to have a very long-lasting effect. It won't just be a single event and, heads you win, tails you lose. It's going to be something that will last years. And people, I think, will really appreciate that. And I mean, take greater value in saying, okay, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to dedicate myself to this. And it's going to pay off. And it's going to pay off in wondrous ways because the technology is going to keep on going. Our devices are going to get smarter and faster, although I don't have any idea. They say it's a Galaxy 9. 9's the last single digit integer, so I don't, I'm sure they'll call it Galaxy 10. But they're going to keep on making advances. And with that, we're still going to have the questions of privacy and security and worth and value. Those will all still be question marks. But I think we'll feel better about our lives because we'll be able to count on something at least staying the same for a few years instead of doing something on Monday and seeing it get all screwed up by Friday. Really, this 2020 has been the year where if you ever got angry as a kid that, other friends of yours would change the rules in the middle of the game, where Lucy pulls the football away from Charlie Brown or somebody moves the goalpost. That was this year. And next year, we won't find that anymore. It'll finally, things will start to make sense, but we'll still be making adjustments, maybe even to some things that we've never done before. And like I said, that'll peak in June. And I will tell people, try your best not to get too terribly attached to things because you might want to initiate a change later on, but you won't have to. It won't feel forced. So some people will be buying a house for the first time. We're still going to see interest rates around 0%. So the housing market's still going to be amazing. We're going to see the stock market go way over 30,000. I think the value of gold will be way over 2,500. I predict, easily silver to be well over 35, if not $45. Last year, I predicted silver to be at $30, and we got really close a couple months ago. It's pulled back a bit. Right now, it's about $24, but back in I think February, it was only 16.
Right.
So we're seeing progress that we can measure and we can calculate, and that progress is going to double or triple in just 1 or 2 years. Part of that's because of the debt and the printing of all this fake money. I think even Target raised the prices of all their monopoly gains in the toy department for fear that people are going to just open the box and take the cash out and try to spend it. But I do warn people on the cryptocurrencies. I've never felt safe with those because until a central government can control the actual value of the currency, I don't know that any government's really going to openly embrace it. Instead, I think you'll see governments try to create their own.
Right.
And that'll be the new big challenge. The last phenomena that we're going to see is Jupiter moving closer to the sign of Pisces. This happens in April and May, and then becomes a little bit more long-lasting at the end of 2021. And what we're going to see there is people, especially men, really acknowledging their feelings. And finally, separating logic, reasoning, and science from their emotions. I think for years we've always tried to figure out if getting upset was right or wrong.
Right.
If crying was right or wrong. Okay for women, not okay for men.
Right.
And I think we're finally getting to a maturity point where we're no longer asking if our emotions are right or wrong. I think we finally learned through 2020 that it's healthy to get upset. It's healthy to get angry and stand your ground as long as you're applying it toward, some kind of constructive purpose. And if you're isolated and you're just learning more about yourself, that can be constructive as well. So I see it as win-win now. Whereas earlier in the year, I just kept wondering, wow, where are we headed with all this? In fact, I just called my governor's office last week, wanting to know when I can get my other business open in downtown Tucson, and they said, well, we're still in this phase and you can't have more than, 10 people in a room. And I'm like, well, what's the criteria for our next release from these restrictions? Crickets. So governments still don't really have a direction yet, and probably won't until we get to 2021. And I think that January, February, March, we'll finally start to see, I dare I call it real human strength, of real confidence coming forward. People that were wishy-washy or indecisive in 2020, I think can step forward in 2021. I don't think people will be as afraid to make a mistake and maybe own up and take accountability and apologize for things that go wrong. And maybe instead of just whining about it, like, wow, we got all these wildfires in California. Geez, don't we have bad luck? And it's kind of like, wait a minute, Texas has 3 more times the forest that you guys do. They haven't had one wildfire all year. In Arizona, we've got very strict forest management. And people complain all the time. The forest ranger told us we can't plant this bush and we've got to clean up our yard and we've got to get rid of this. And I'm like, good. Maybe your house won't burn down. So I just think we're going to see accountability, especially the cities that have experienced riots. And what was it? I still haven't figured out what happened in Seattle. People took over the middle of the city and declared their own country. I think. They even created their own flag. And I thought, well, this is different. Was that Monty Python? And now for something completely different.
Right.
We're not going to see those shenanigans anymore. None of the planets are going to put up with that. And accountability is going to be held, or at least holding people to at least a reasonable standard. Maybe the standards of a 20-year-old, but I think we're done with the days of standards of a 5-year-old. And I think people can see now absurdity, immaturity, just ridiculous behavior. Because I really think most of 2020 was people watching the news with their eyes bugging out of their head going,
right,
what am I watching? It was like the presidential debate last night. What am I watching? That was the perfect description of 2020. It really is. And we thank God we won't see that again in 2021 and won't see it for several years. Not because there's no presidential election, but because I just think the times are changing and people are going from being shocked and amazed or amused to, hey, this is silly, this is stupid, let's fix this. And I think all of us will be, oh, thank God. Thank the universe, thank the cosmos. And that's where I'm being a little more point blank to my clients who are still trying to catch their breath from this year. I'm trying to get them to really take a more serious look at where is Aquarius in your chart? How will compassion help you make decisions later in 2021? So the first half of 2021, I think, is going to be finding your direction, committing to a course, and the rest of the year spent on maybe exactly how you feel about that. Because I think dedication, commitment, going the extra yard is all emotional. I've met a variety of successful people. I know you have too. And if somebody said, Larry, what do you think makes one person more successful than another, given they have equal education, maybe equal skills? I'd say passion. The people that are up all day and half the night and they can't quit writing their book, or they can't stop inventing new ideas, it's because they really want to, or they're in love with what they do for a living. I think that's a big difference. There's a lot of jobs that have disappeared in 2020. They're not coming back. Hospitality, hotels, travel, all of that's changed. I don't know anyone that's ready to jump on a cruise ship right now.
Right.
No one. There's no line. There's no need to take a number and wait. Cruise lines are, come on, half your trip will be free. And there's no takers. So people that are in that industry are going to have to rethink what they do and how they do it. Packing people like sardines in a big ship, that's not going to happen anymore. Nobody's going to buy that ticket. So they're going to have to reinvent themselves. I don't know if you feel this way, but I've wanted the airlines to get rid of that damn middle seat for years. And I think we'll finally get our wish. Finally. I'd say, I'll even pay $10 or $50. Get rid of this middle seat. Well, now they've gone ahead and done it anyway.
Right.
So I think a lot of the changes are absolutely for the better. I can absolutely guarantee you every restaurant I've been to in the last 6 months is the cleanest it's ever been in history. The food is better than it's ever been in history. The preparation, the time, the care. I mean, the restaurants that have survived are grateful. The owners are grateful. The people there are happier. They're happy to be at work.
Right.
Grocery stores. Some used to be a mess. I won't say I'm ready to eat off the floor, but I watch them every day, sweeping, cleaning, checking. I mean, we lose 20 to 40,000 people every year to flu. Every year. Doesn't make the headlines. Not the top news story. But I thought, if we would just wash our hands. I'm not talking about moving a mountain or building a house with them. I'm just talking about simple things we learned in kindergarten. Wash your hands. Wipe the table off when you're done. Really ridiculously simple things. Clean the bathroom. Oh, that's something on my list this week. We're going to be healthier people. We're not going to see as many cases of the flu. People are going to be more conscious of, I think, the distance between themselves. Europe was always known for people talking very close to one another. And they always complained that Americans stand so far apart when we converse.
Right.
But I think we're going to see a lot more. I think that's in our psyche now. That I don't need to physically whisper in your ear to tell you something. I don't need to be only 2 feet away when we're talking. We can now comfortably be at least 4 to 6 feet away, and I don't think it'll upset us. I don't think anybody would be offended if you're standing 6 feet away, or if you shake hands, your shirt pocket. Hey, got a little bottle of hand sanitizer right here. I don't think people are going to freak out, and I just think that little extra care is going to be with us permanently. I don't see it as just being 2020 and we're done. I think everybody, I see children. Heck, children are washing their hands more often. And who among us has never been to a public restroom where we saw somebody leave without washing their hands?
Right.
Permanent human change right there. We're not going to see that anymore. I even saw one person who was going to leave the public restroom, and 2 guys like, hey, you need to wash your hands. Oh, sorry. I mean, we're talking new form of peer pressure here.
Right.
And now, that's another thing we're going to see a lot of. Touchless places. Like can you imagine going to a public restroom and never having to touch anything but yourself? It's going to happen. I see a lot of new, if you go through Home Depot or Lowe's, touchless faucets. I know it sounds crazy. Infrared toilets. You pass your hand in front of the beam, the toilet flushes.
Right.
I would look at that. Well, it's like magic. And I just, I know it sounds kind of weird to laugh at that, but I just think everything will be made that way. A year from now, maybe 2 years from now, no one will remember what a toilet handle was. Nobody will remember, well, this one's for cold and this one's for hot. You'll just speak out loud.
We'll just give it orders. Well, as we're wrapping it up, Larry, because this is fascinating, and I've just enthralled with all the things that you shared with us. So as we're reaching into the last quarter of the year and looking forward to 2021, what are say 3 to 5 things just to summarize that we're going to want to do to get ready for the end of the year and the beginning of the next, and what to look for. If you could summarize it more
Sure.
generalize or globalize it for us.
Yeah. First and foremost, the number one virus we're all facing is fear. Whatever you're afraid of, whatever you're terrified of, if you're running around with your hair on fire screaming, Orange Man bad, Orange Man bad, you've got to change that. You just have to change that. Hatred, it leads to really dark places. And none of us should be hiding in the basement anymore, afraid of the next micro germ that's out there. This is not the first pandemic of human history, and it won't be the last. Hopefully we learned a few things, but the most important thing is, how did we deal with our fear? Second thing, how do we honestly feel about ourselves? This has been a huge challenge to everybody's self-esteem. Even people I've always called arrogant became humble this year.
Right.
They realized what loss means. I mean, people I even know that are multimillionaires have had horrific losses, and business as well as family members. So how do we feel about ourselves now? I think it's a really good question. Every therapist, every counselor that I work with, and have done one now for almost 30 years, we always ask that question, but this year we really mean it, and we really need an answer. And you can keep it private, keep it to yourself, but answer the question.
Right.
Okay? Third thing I would say is realize you're going to be forced to commit to long-term goals. Even people that think they're dying from some disease, the medical breakthroughs are mind-blowing right now. Also, most of the regulations on testing medication have been temporarily suspended. So we're going to see, I mean, in some cases, miraculously, maybe they think 8 to 10 times more medications in the next 6 months. So make long-term plans. Be prepared to commit to them. If somebody says you've got, the red monkey virus and you got 6 months to live, don't buy into that. Okay, maybe they're right. Okay, but odds are they're not right, and something of a breakthrough is going to happen at some point. We're learning new things about health all the time. Commit to long-term plans. Fourth, I would say, open your mind. We're going to see new inventions. We're going to see things really bizarre, not just cars driving by themselves, but we're going to see individual airplanes that fly themselves. Take off and land, you don't need to do a thing. We're going to see robots talk to you in the grocery store. I've already seen prototypes in Japan right now, where how many times you go into a store and you're looking for something, you can't find it? And nowadays we try to look for the website on the phone and figure out what, you won't have to do that anymore. There'll be literally a mechanical robot, and you'll be able, just like an Amazon Echo, you'll be able to walk right up and say, hey, Joe, can you help me find the wild rice? And he'll tell you what aisle, what shelf, maybe even escort you there. So keep your mind open. Things are not going to be going back to 2019. So people saying, oh, I can't wait till things get back to normal. There won't be. There won't be an old normal. I mean, even going to a baseball game, it's going to be very different. They're already talking about hand sanitizers in every aisle. Contactless concessions and food. In other words, I'll be able to use my smartphone, never get out of my seat at the baseball game, and I'll order my hot dog and chips and whatever else, and I'll have a Diet Pepsi on the way, and they'll bring it right to my seat. And honestly, for $75, they can deliver it to you. So the new normal is going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a lot less effort. And we're going to really appreciate, let's say, waiters and waitresses in restaurants. When someone brings us, the plate of food we're looking forward to, you won't see people shortchanging the waitress anymore. You won't see cheapskates, so to speak. We have a new normal, and it's going to be fantastic. And then last but not least, I think overall relationships are changing. The old idea of living with somebody just because it's convenient, not going to happen. Staying married to somebody in a loveless relationship, not going to happen. I think people are going to, be a lot more honest about what they're looking for in a relationship. That might have been a pipe dream in 2019, but I don't know that anybody's really willing to put up with a bunch of crap anymore.
Right.
Honestly, male or female, I don't think it matters.
Right.
So if that's a good summary, that's
Yeah,
probably the best I got.
It's a great summary and worthwhile to take note as we were reflecting on this very interesting and upheaval that we've experienced this last was it the 9 months. Yes, it's great insights to look forward to what's going to happen next year and be accountable for those choices.
It'll be okay. It'll be okay. We don't have to do it perfectly.
Right, exactly. So, well, Larry, I want to thank you for this. And how do people actually find you?
They can reach me at my website. That's the easiest place. www.larrymartin.biz. It's LARRYMARTIN.biz, like in business. And they can reach me every which way that way. You can also find me on Parler, on Twitter. You can find me at my email, Larimar, LARIMAR 2000@hotmail.com. Or you can pick up this strange Galaxy device and call me at 513-476-2222 in the United States.
Well, I love it. And I look forward to a lot of people getting a hold of you because you've been instrumental in my life decisions. And I want to thank you for that. And I look forward to more conversations. And I also look forward to some private, sessions with you where I can start planning, 2021 for myself. So
we're going to be so happy by the end of next year. We're going to probably have a whole new view of the world, and I'm looking forward to it. Well, so blessings and namaste.
Yeah, blessings and namaste, and thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Dr. Rademaker's Prescription for Your Transformation. Continue the path towards discovering your own authentic genius by tuning in next time for more real conversations with real people.